It is early morning in the royal courtyard of Antananarivo. The air is thick with smoke from smoldering torches, and the low murmur of a restless crowd drifts over the stone walls. You stand barefoot on the cold earth, surrounded by dozens of fellow soldiers. Men who, like you, have fought tooth and nail to keep foreign boots off Malagasy soil. The British, the French. They came with ships, rifles, and dreams of carving your homeland into a colony. And each time, you stood in their way. You've bled for this island. You've buried friends for it. But none of that matters now. The woman on the throne, a woman you've sworn to serve, believes loyalty cannot be proven by words or by victories. Queen Ranavalona I, the lioness of Madagascar, believes loyalty is something that can be tasted and choked on. A hush falls over the court as servants approach with wooden trays. On each, 3 pale, glistening strips of raw chicken skin are coiled like snakes. No spices. No salt. Just wet flesh, cold as a corpse. This is the trial. The queen's voice cuts through the silence. It is neither a shout nor a whisper, yet it carries the weight of a death sentence. A loyal man will know the proper way to pass it. The rest will be cleansed from my court. You don't dare ask why. You've heard the whispers. Last month, an entire patrol was slaughtered for failing this test. One by one, men take their trays. You watch a comrade in front of you swallow the first strip, then gag on the second. A guard steps forward, his spear rising. One thrust, and the man's body crumples onto the earth. No explanation. No mercy. Now it's your turn. You kneel before the tray. The skin is slick, its sour smell making your stomach twist. You force the first strip down, then the second. The third sticks in your throat, scraping on the way down. Your vision swims. Your body rebels. You vomit, once, twice, splattering the dirt with half-digested flesh. The queen leans forward on her throne, her eyes narrowing. She does not ask questions. She does not deliberate. Guilty, she says. And in that moment you understand. In her mind, a loyal man would have vomited all 3 at once. You failed an impossible test, and for that, you will die. Here, in the court of Ranavalona, truth is irrelevant. The only law is her will, and her will is death. Before the throne, she was Ramavo, quiet eyes, careful steps, a shadow moving through palace corridors. She learned early that in Madagascar's court, breath itself was political. A misplaced word could bury a family, a glance could open a grave. Her father's warning of an assassination plot earned them royal favor, and the king adopted Ramavo into the dynasty. The gesture looked generous. It was really a chain. Proximity to power is the most dangerous place on earth. She married Radama, the king's heir, and watched the old order turn inside out. Radama was modern in ambition, alliances with Europeans, armies drilled in foreign fashion, a crown tilted toward the future. But modernization has its own whips, and Radama kept the oldest one of all. Purge your rivals before they purge you. Ramavo learned to sit very still while the walls bled. She learned who whispered to whom. She learned the value of silence, and the price of memory. In public, she was the dutiful wife. In private, she constructed a map of loyalties more precise than any coastline. Which noble hated which cousin, which general drank too much, which priest could be bought, which taboo could be bent without breaking. She moved carefully, like a hunter testing the wind, placing favors where favors would mature into debts, and debts into knives. Radama sickened. The court murmured about syphilis, fate, the gods' arithmetic. Others spoke of drafts that tasted like rainwater and burned like coals once they reached the liver. Ramavo said nothing. She never contradicted a rumor that served her and never fed one that didn't. When Radama died, the law pointed to another branch, an heir with better blood on paper and fewer allies in the dark. Ramavo's map was ready. She moved first. Speed is its own kind of legitimacy. Messengers flew by night. Gates opened for men who had sworn to keep them shut. Gold changed owners. Promises changed hearts. By the time the sun rose, the palace had decided it had always intended for Ramavo to rule. The coronation was not pretty. Tradition seldom is. Naked skin, bull's blood, drums that hit the ribcage like fists, an initiation older than the arguments against it. Ramavo stepped into the red and came out as Ranavalona I, a queen whose crown was not a symbol but a blade. Then came the settling of accounts. Those with claims to the throne were protected in cells where no knives were needed, only hunger. Men were speared to avoid shedding royal women's blood. Families were erased with the manners of piety. A pawn had reached the far side of the board. She did not become a queen. She revealed that she had always been one. The throne was no longer a seat, it was a fortress. And Ranavalona ruled from behind its high walls with a conviction carved from paranoia. Every shadow was a conspiracy, every whisper a rope waiting to tighten around her neck. She would strike first. She always struck first. Her first decree: erase the bloodlines that could challenge hers. Cousins, in-laws, half-siblings. Their bodies disappeared into cells where the air was damp and the light was a rumor. Those too noble to execute were left to starve, their deaths stretched into weeks, their suffering a slow chant to her supremacy. In Madagascar, royal blood was sacred. It could not be spilled, but Ranavalona had no shortage of ways to kill without breaking a taboo. Her second decree: untangle Madagascar from the grip of Europe. Radama's treaties with Britain and France were burned. European merchants, teachers, and diplomats were cast out. Trade halted, and the island's gates slammed shut. She called it protecting tradition. The British called it defiance. The French called it an insult. Both sent warships. The French landed first. They came expecting an easy victory. Europe had already conquered so many far-off lands with the press of a musket volley. But the swamps of Madagascar had teeth. Malaria shredded their ranks before the Queen's soldiers even arrived. When her troops struck, the battle was not a fight but a harvest. French bodies were left to rot in the sand, their heads mounted on pikes along the shore. The display was not military strategy, it was theater. She was telling the world, "You will not take this island from me." But fear was never enough to satisfy her. She turned her gaze inward. Christianity had begun to creep through the island like a quiet tide, carried by missionaries and their schools. At first, she tolerated them. They were useful, teaching skills that swelled her treasuries. But tolerance rots quickly under suspicion. Christianity, she decided, was a spear in the hands of the Europeans, and she would snap it before it struck. The law changed. Conversion was forbidden. Preaching was outlawed. Those who disobeyed faced a death that was as public as it was cruel. One favored execution saw victims bound by ropes and hung over cliffs, left for days without water while their families watched. When the ropes finally frayed, the condemned fell to the rocks below. To her, this was not cruelty. It was order. Terror was the law, and law was survival. By the mid-1840s, Queen Ranavalona's grip on Madagascar was absolute. There were no rivals left to silence, no missionaries bold enough to preach in the open, and no European fleet that dared anchor without caution. But power like hers never rests. It must keep moving, searching for the next display of dominance. The order came without warning. The Queen announced that the entire royal court would go on a buffalo hunt. Not just the nobles, everyone. Courtiers, advisors, soldiers, servants, and slaves. Every noble was commanded to bring a full retinue, swelling the procession to a staggering 50,000 people. The Queen demanded comfort, even in the wild. A road was to be built ahead of the hunting party so that she could travel without hardship. But there was no planning, no maps, no supply lines, no reserves of food. The builders hacked into thick jungle and swamps under a relentless sun, fighting both the undergrowth and the mosquitoes that carried malaria like a curse in their wings. The disease spread first among the laborers. Their bodies, weakened by exhaustion and hunger, began to fall. But Ranavalona didn't slow the march. More workers were seized from villages along the route, their protests silenced by spears. Food was scarce from the start. Even nobles paid absurd prices for a bowl of rice, and most ate whatever they could snatch or steal. Slaves and commoners fared worse. They starved as the Queen's column devoured every edible scrap from the land it crossed. Corpses, stripped of valuables, were tossed into hastily dug ditches by the roadside. Weeks passed. The hunt had yet to see a single buffalo. The road stretched deeper into nowhere, a trail of death laid in dirt and sweat. But the queen seemed unfazed, perhaps even pleased. This was no hunt for animals. It was a hunt for submission, a demonstration that even in the face of suffering and death, her court would follow. After 16 weeks, the column halted. The road ended in the middle of the jungle. No buffalo had been killed. 10,000 were dead, from fever, starvation, and exhaustion, and those who returned carried scars that were more than physical. The road itself became a kind of monument, a path carved by misery, leading nowhere, built for nothing except the satisfaction of one woman's will. For those who survived, the truth was clear. Under Ranavalona, death could come not only from defiance, but from obedience. By the time the jungle road was abandoned and the survivors limped back to Antananarivo, Queen Ranavalona was no longer just a ruler. She was a force of nature, unpredictable and absolute. For 3 decades, she had waged war not only against invading Europeans, but against her own people. Her rule had carved deep into the island's soul, leaving a landscape littered with graves and a population too afraid to whisper dissent. But fear has a way of growing in all directions. It reached her own son. Prince Rakoto, heir to the throne, had watched his mother's reign bleed Madagascar dry. He had seen her courts turn loyalty into a game of death, her armies unleashed to pillage their own people, and her laws wielded like a blade against anyone who stood in her path. He began plotting, quietly, cautiously, aligning himself with European allies who saw in him a way to unseat the queen. The plot was bold but naive. Her spies caught the whispers long before any move was made. When the conspiracy came to light, Ranavalona spared her son and his European companions, but only him. The others she condemned to a march through the worst swamps Madagascar could offer. The jungle claimed most, their bodies lost to disease, leeches, and crocodiles. Rakoto would try again in the years that followed, but each attempt unraveled before it could begin. Her paranoia deepened with age. Orders grew more erratic, punishments more severe. The court learned that safety lay only in silence and obedience, and even then, it was temporary. The queen's justice could be summoned by nothing more than a passing suspicion. When her death finally came in 1861, it was not by poison, blade, or uprising. Ranavalona died in her palace, in her own bed, surrounded by the silence she had cultivated so carefully. The streets outside were hushed, but not in mourning. Madagascar held its breath, waiting to see if the nightmare had truly ended. Rakoto ascended as King Radama II, wasting no time in reversing his mother's decrees. Treaties with Europe were renewed, Christianity was legalized, and the brutality that had defined the court began to fade. But nothing could undo what had been done. Historians estimate that during her 33-year reign, between half and 3/4 of Madagascar's population perished, through executions, starvation, forced labor, disease, and endless conflict. The exact number will never be known, but the scale is enough to cement her legacy. Ranavalona I was not simply the most murderous woman in history. She was proof that a throne, in the wrong hands, can become a weapon that kills a nation from the inside out.